Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Optica with Gabriel Salguero. So excited so many of you have decided to follow in the last couple of weeks. And as always, we encourage you to share it with your friends, with your family, in a way that inspires, educates, and empowers. And today, I want to talk about an issue based on a few phone calls with friends and colleagues about a very important question: Christian selective outrage. Now, this is not an easy topic to understand. So I'm going to try to unpack it based on some very recent experiences that my friends have called me about. By selective outrage, they meant to say, and I should say, not all of the friends who called me are Christians. They're not believers, but they are interested and intrigued by the faith. They are seekers. And part of that reason I'm doing this podcast is because I know they're interested in Christianity, and I want to respond to their legitimate questions. By selective outrage, they mean, how come Christians are outraged at certain social evils and sins, but they don't call out those same sins in their own Christian faith or tradition? Let me give you an example. Recently received a phone call about many Christians critiquing Bad Bunny and his concert. There is much to critique there. I understand the legitimate critiques of some of the hypersexualization of Bad Bunny's lyrics, of some of the excesses and the objectification of women in his lyrics, and many, many others. I'm just using this as a case study. He's not alone. And a young person said to me, they said, Gabriel, how come evangelical Christians are outraged at Bad Bunny's sexual sin, hypersexualization, and objectification, but when a political candidate they like does it, they're silent? Or worse yet, they publicly endorse a political candidate that has similar views and treatment of women. You know what they said? That is selective outrage. Then they pressed even further and they said to me, how is it that Christians are very vociferous about the sins of celebrities, but when famous and well-known pastors commit similar peccadillos or worse, violating the gospel they portend to proclaim, they quickly run to, we have to have grace and mercy without accountability? You know what you call that? Selective outrage. When you are outraged at the sins of people, which are sins, which are injustices that you don't know, you're outraged at their sin, but in your own house, in your own faith tradition, in your own denomination, you remain silent when similar or worse things happen. Selective outrage is killing the credibility of the evangelical church and the church and faith traditions around the world. I want to be clear on this. It's not just Christians that have selective outrage. It's political pundits on the left and on the right that will critique something when somebody who's from a different party does something, but when somebody from their own party does the same or similar or worse thing, they remain silent. Selective outrage is often convenient. It's convenient because we protect our own interests, our own ideologies, and we cease to be truthful, transparent, and objective. I think there's a whole generation of people who all they want from our Christian public witness is for us to be consistent, objective, not perfect. None of us is perfect, but can we be objective and consistent? When we call out the sins and abuses and excesses of singers and rappers and trap artists, will we also do it for politicians and pastors and leaders within our traditions? I submit to you that when Peter wrote, it is necessary for judgment to begin in the house of God, he didn't write it in a kind of legalistic way to condemn the church, but in a way for the church to be self-reflective, like Jesus taught us, to look at the log in our own eyes before we look at the specks in other people's eyes. Let me be clear. We should denounce injustice. We should denounce sexualization, hypersexualization. We should and do denounce the objectification of women and children. We do denounce greed and avarice and injustice to the poor and the marginalized. But we need to do it consistently. Recently, I wrote an article about scandals in the church and how we need to deal with them. You'll be able to read it in the weeks and months to come. And one of the things I said was, there's a generation of people who are looking for accountability, not just for us to project this kind of piety and holiness against others, but to be deeply self-reflective in our call for piety and holiness and justice. There are entire groups of people who voted for political candidates who have a terrible record on sexuality, who have a terrible record on issues of justice, and not only remain quiet, but publicly endorse those positions, while simultaneously having outrage against celebrities who espouse similar positions. Question: why is that? Why can't we be consistent? Let me submit to you several reasons. Number one, we are often outraged against people who have no relationship with us. So it's easy to talk about them and us instead of about talking about all of us doing things that we need to repent from. It is a position of privilege from distance. Secondly, we're selectively outraged because we are often not outraged with people who share similar positions on some issues, but are contradictory to us on other issues. And because they can help us with one thing, we ignore their injustice in other things. I call that selective outrage of convenience. Well, they're an elected official. They can help me. They have power. They can move things for me. So I'll keep silent when they do things that hurt the church and hurt the credibility of the gospel. And thirdly, sometimes selective outrage is a consequence of we have not studied deeply or broadly all the positions and actions of people. Again, my call today, my conversation with you, leader, pastor, influencer, is not that there are not things to be outraged about. There are many, tons. Sometimes you can have outrage exhaustion. My invitation is, can we be objective? Can we call out sinfulness and injustice, even with people with whom we disagree when it happens in our tradition, in our tribes? People from the same political persuasion and ideology as us? Or are we so enamored with power that we only outrage with people who are different from us? Put this way, why do we demand from Babylon what we have abandoned in Zion? Often Christians are demanding from people who don't share the faith or convictions to reflect our convictions when we ourselves are not reflecting our deepest convictions in our lived out ethic and our lived out theology and our practice. How many celebrity pastors have done so much harm and we've been quiet in the name of a cheap grace and an unbiblical view of mercy and accountability? At the same time, we become like the sons of Zebedee, calling down fire for famous people who have had no knowledge of Christ or the gospel. This is important. This is critical. We should be outraged at the things that hurt people and hurt the heart of God. We should speak up. But at the very least, for the sake of consistency, for the sake of the credibility of the witness of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for the sake of future generations. Let's not just call it out with people we don't like. Let's call it out in our own lives. Let's call it out in the church. Let's call it out with politicians and pundits and leaders who perhaps have done us favors or moved our agenda along, but in other parts of their lives violate the very thing we are called to uphold. Please write to me. Post your comments. This is a conversation, a much longer conversation, on how we disciple the church. We speak to leaders on a consistent ethic, on talking about things without blinders and being as objective as we can. Nobody's 100%. Let's not call out Babylon without correcting Zion. As always, I'm Gabriel Salguero, and this is Optica, where we invite you to open your eyes and see what God is doing. Till the next time.